Welcome to this presentation on consensus. In this presentation, we'll talk about what consensus is, why it's important, and how you actually go about reaching it. This is important information because in class we're going to be doing an activity around consensus. It may be useful to have your notebook handy because we're going to ask you to take some notes and write some thoughts. So what exactly is consensus? When you hear the word consensus or think about a definition for this word, what comes to mind? Go ahead and jot down in your notebook how you would define consensus. For our purposes, consensus means alignment among group members. And alignment is distinctly different than agreement. Alignment is that I may not completely agree with the decision. It may not be my number one choice or what I would choose if I was working on my own, but I support the overall goal or where the group is going. May not be my favorite, yet I'm willing to support it and live with it in order to support the group, as long as it doesn't compromise my values. It is important to remember that if your values are compromised, you need to speak up and say something. You're not in alignment with that decision. Consensus is distinctly different from voting by majority rules in a few ways. One, with consensus, every voice is heard in a quest to get in alignment with the group. With majority rules, the less powerful or the less popular voices are often not heard or pushed aside. And once consensus is reached, members must support that decision as if it were their first choice, even if it's not. Here's an example. Perhaps a group is trying to decide on what they're going to have for breakfast, and somebody proposes that they have maple glazed bacon. While this may win as the most popular choice, those people in the group who do not eat bacon or do not eat pork would be left out and wouldn't have anything to eat for breakfast. With consensus, all the members of that group would collaborate and they would find something that everyone in the group could eat, even though it may not be their first preference. So perhaps they decide they're going to have pancakes with maple syrup instead. And even though this may not be the favorite option of some people, they're willing to live with it. They're willing to eat the pancakes so that everybody in the group can be involved. One thing that's often said about consensus or reaching consensus is that it takes a lot of time. And while this may be true, that voting or going with majority rules is actually a quicker method, reaching consensus can be done quickly. And we have a method in which we can do that. We call it the thumbs method. So let's review. First, thumbs up means that the option being discussed is my favorite option. 100% agree with it, I would do it if it was the only option, and I support it. So I'm thumbs up. Second, thumbs sideways means that I'm neutral about the option. It's not my favorite, not my number one choice, however, I'm willing to support it or be in alignment with it. And lastly, thumbs down means that I cannot live with this option. I'm not willing to support it. Perhaps it goes against my values, or I just don't think it's going to work for whatever reason. I am thumbs down. Even if I'm thumbs down, that doesn't mean that I go to judger. It means that I stay curious about what the option is or what we might be able to adjust to make that option work. With this method, the group is in consensus once everyone is either a thumbs up or a thumbs sideways. If there are any thumbs down for whatever reason, that is a point in which the group needs to stop and have a discussion because they're not in consensus. Once the group has a discussion and can figure out a way to perhaps make an adjustment or choose a different option that makes sure that everybody in the group is in alignment, then we can go with the thumb method again and make sure that everyone is then thumbs up or thumbs sideways. Once that is the case, we can move on with a discussion. So why might consensus be important? I want you to think about for a moment a time in your life when you've experienced consensus, that when it was important that you had consensus. Take a few moments and write down a few examples in your notebook. It might be a good idea to go ahead and pause the presentation at this point in order to write down your examples. Hopefully, you were able to come up with a few examples. Here's an example for you. Think about your weekend plans. You're getting together with some friends, you're going to hang out and do some things that would be fun. You want to make sure that everybody who is involved is having a good time, is wanting to do the things that you guys just decide to do, all of that stuff. And if one person takes over the show or decides what's going to happen, that probably will not be the outcome. It's important that everybody involved in that situation knows what's going on, wants to have it happen, and is engaged in that decision. So weekend plans may not be that big of a decision, or that major of a decision. But why might consensus be important to reach, especially when you do have major decisions that affect the entire group? Why might consensus be an option instead of majority rules? One of the dangers of using majority rules is that those that vote against the idea or the decision often check out of the situation, no longer contribute to it, and sometimes they even take action to sabotage the outcome. This doesn't allow the group to move forward in a cohesive way. The goal with consensus or alignment is to create a situation that everyone can live with and support, even if it's not their favorite choice. This way, the group can move forward as a whole and follow through with that decision. We think this is pretty important, and we see a lot of value in consensus, and here's why. Everybody in the group can contribute to the conversation and has a say in the outcome. What this does is it creates buy-in among the group since everybody had a voice in what happened in the first place. And it ensures that everyone is on the same page. No one is left behind in the conversation or the decision, nobody checks out, and everybody can move forward as a whole. Think about if you can think of any other reasons why consensus might be important, or other value you see in it. Jot down those notes in your notebook before moving on. Consensus is a great tool. However, you can't use it without being in a group of people who are trying to work towards a common goal. So it's critical that you have a clear approach of how you actually put this tool to use. It's important to remember that we need to understand people's emotions and feelings and their values and use that information when we're trying to reach consensus. And for us personally, not to change anything just to appease people's feelings, or in our own cases, not to change our own feelings to appease the others. So how do you go about using consensus? Here's how. The first thing is to set the scene. To establish some ground rules that guide the group efforts, and remember that conflict is a mutual problem. So if we get in conflict with each other, we need to work together to get out of it. Respect pays big time here in setting the scene for how you're going to engage with each other. Once you've done that, you can move on to the gathering information phase. This is where you try to get the underlying interest, needs, and concerns of the entire group and the whole situation. It's important to ask for facts versus opinions, to listen with empathy to your group members, to clearly and concisely identify the issues or the decision that needs to be made, and when you're talking with your group members, to use I statements. It's also important to remain flexible with your group, and to clarify anybody's feelings that might be happening while you're making this decision. Once you've gathered all this information, then you can agree on the problem. Or another way to think about this is the decision that needs to be made. This might sound like an obvious step, but often there are different underlying needs or interests or goals that can cause people to perceive the situation, the problem, the decision very, very differently. So once we all agree on this is what we're actually here to decide on, or this is the problem that needs to be solved, then we can actually move forward to doing those things, making that decision or solving that problem. Once we agree on what that is, we move on to brainstorming the solutions or the ideas. If everyone is going to feel satisfied with what's going to happen, it's important that everybody gets to have their input in generating those solutions or those ideas. So you brainstorm all the possible solutions or ideas. You're open to anything at this point, including those that you personally have never considered before. Once you have all of these ideas gathered, then it's time to come to consensus on what you're actually going to do. It's important that you talk about all the different options and that you then assess that you actually are in consensus, that everyone can support the decision that is being made. This might be a good time to implement the thumbs method. You're actually going to have an opportunity to explore using consensus or building consensus in a group activity during face-to-face. And during this process, there's a couple things we want you to keep in mind. One, to focus on the context, not simply the content. These steps may come in handy as you're doing this process. Remember that the goal is to effectively reach consensus as a group, and that the intentions of this process are to explore problem solving and group making decisions, navigating challenging situations, and reaching consensus.